My name is Alan Pallet, and this is the Sunday morning service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Pottstown. I am a member of the congregation, and we will be leading the service today. We are a congregation that welcomes all, whether you're seeing us with spirits high or spirits low. We welcome you. Whether your beliefs tend toward atheism, liberalism, or conservatism, we welcome you. So whoever you are, wherever you are, whomever you love, we are glad you are with us today. Our religion, Unitarian Universalism, is built on 7 principles. These principles call us to promote a set of values that include justice, compassion, liberty, equality, democracy, and respect for the earth. In addition, our UU culture promotes the notion that wisdom can be found from many sources, with a special place held by reason and science, but also can be found in art and spiritual intuition. We believe we have much to learn from the great thinkers of the past, but in building the future, we are not permanently tied to any past theology or ideology. With these values in mind, we consider a wide array of topics at our various Sunday morning services, and we have a wide array of speakers, including our ministers, guest ministers, members of our congregation, lay speakers from outside our fellowship. Okay, it's time for announcements. Do we have any announcements? Please give your name and...
Hi, I'm Miranda, and I know it's early, but I'm thinking about the holidays. And I want to work on a little project that might sort of be a little fundraiser. And I started it last year, but Gary and I were up at the cabin and back and forth, and it just didn't work out. I want to put together a cookbook or a collection of recipes for the holidays. So if you have a favorite, family favorite, send it to me. I'll word process and put it all together. And we'll have a fun book of holiday treats. And maybe we'll increase the treasury a little. Not much, but a little. And it'll be fun. So just send them off to me, Miranda. Let's see. I'll have more information about that in the newsletter with my email address and everything. So thank you.
Any more announcements?
One more.
Okay.
No.
False alarm.
False alarm, okay. We will now light the chalice. It is the event that marks the beginning of the main part of our service, where we change the focus of our minds from our everyday activities to a more relaxed, contemplative state. Thank you, Mary. Now we will have a story for all ages. Ruby Barnhouse will present the story, so I invite Ruby and the children to come up to the front.
And Justine will be my page turner. recommend that you get yourself a dragon. He'll be your dearest friend. And though it may seem strange, I can guarantee it's true. I ought to know. I have one. His name is Diggory-Doo. Do you guys see Diggory? Yeah. We've had stories with him before, haven't we? It's delightful and a joy to have around. But when I got my dragon, one thing I quickly found, they need a lot of training. Okay. They need a lot, so they behave the way they should and not how they should not. One lesson Diggory learned was when he made the soccer team. He wanted to be perfect, but he was too extreme. Once he missed the winning goal and cost his team the game, he hung his head in shame, for he felt he was to blame. Once Diggory had a math test, so he studied every day. He thought he made a perfect grade, but much to his dismay, he had made a small mistake. So when he got a score, instead of a 100, he had made a 94. Diggory-Doo can breathe a flame, but made a big mistake when he lit the candles on a buddy's birthday cake. It's not showing every page. Yeah, thanks. He set the tablecloth on fire, and though it happened long ago, he talked about it all the time. He couldn't let it go. Diggory's teacher broke her arm. He wished to make a card, but dragons are quite clumsy and coloring is hard. When he got outside the lines, I heard my dragon say, "Miss Smith will think my card is dumb," and he threw his card away. Diggory-Doo makes toy trains. He uses model kits. When a model didn't turn out right, he smashed it all to bits. When it comes to making models, Diggory said, "I'm done. Unless they turn out perfect, it isn't any fun." And one time Diggory ran a race, but when he didn't win, he pouted and proclaimed he would never race again. No matter what the dragon did, his behavior was the worst if it didn't turn out perfect or he didn't come in first. He's having a little tantrum down there. You see that? What do you guys think about that? Has stuff like that ever happened to you, where things don't go the way you want and then you get really upset? Nope. Sometimes that happens to me. Diggory was unhappy, so I said, "May I suggest no one ask you? We just ask you do your best. We all make mistakes," I said. "You're not the only one, and being less than perfect." "Your teammates are your friends," I said. "Even when you lose, you shouldn't be embarrassed. There's no need to sing the blues. And even when you study hard, it may not be enough to get the highest grade. Let's face it, math is tough. At least you know you're learning when you didn't know before, what you didn't know before, and that's what really matters, even more than what you score. And though your buddy's birthday got a little out of hand, we all know you didn't mean it. Your friends all understand." So I think my phone skipped the page, but he lit the tablecloth on fire when he tried to blow up the birthday cake. And yes, you burned the tablecloth, an act that you regret. At least you must admit that's some fun we won't forget. And then the kids are saying, "It's okay, it was an accident. Let's just play some games. Like, let's move on. Your teacher loves you, Diggory-Doo. You need not be afraid that she wouldn't be enchanted with the card that you have made." And he gives the card to his teacher, and she says, "Thank you very much. This means a lot." And I think she even has a little tear in her eye. Although you're no Van Gogh, your teacher is aware that you're a thoughtful dragon when you show how much you care. And when you make a model train and don't think you should, break it all to pieces if it doesn't turn out good. For when you make mistakes, it's no reason to feel down. Just do it better next time when the chance comes back around. You don't have to be the winner. It's not that big a deal. No matter where you place, it doesn't change the way I feel. It's not a big deal. You're still my wonderful dragon. I don't care, diggity-do, how many times you blow it. I'll still love you anyway, and I want you to know it. Everybody makes mistakes. Yes, even grown-ups too. Can you guys believe that? Grown-ups sometimes make mistakes. So when you make a boo-boo, Diggory, here's what you should do. Remember, when you make a mistake, it's a chance to grow. Each failure is a lesson, teaching what we did not know. Now when Diggory messes up, even though he's blown it, he doesn't get discouraged, and he's not afraid to own it. Do you guys know what that means? He says, I know that I messed up, and that's okay. He doesn't just like argue and fight and say, I didn't do it. He says, yeah, I did. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I'll do better next time. That's what owning it means. Since Diggory learned his lesson, I know you can learn it too. You can learn from your mistakes like my dragon, Diggory do. The end. Has anyone here ever made a mistake? Yeah, me too. And let me ask you, did you think of something that you could do better next time and get even better at whatever you were doing? Yeah, and that's really the most important thing, right? So thank goodness for mistakes, because if we didn't make mistakes, we wouldn't learn and we wouldn't get better, right? That's right. All done.
Thank you, Ruby. We will now have hymn 350. I will read the first stanza, Carly will play it through, then I'll read the second stanza, and Carly will play it through again. The ceaseless flow of endless time, no one can check or stay. We'll view the past with no regret, nor future with dismay. The present slips into the past, and dreamlight melts away. The breaking of tomorrow's dawn, begins anew today. Thank you, Carly. We are a caring community with an interest in the joys and concerns of our members and friends. Does anyone have a joy or concern they would like to share?
Good morning, I'm Albert, and I think all of you know me. I've been tied up with illness at the Saratoga Center, and I'd like to think I'm recovering, but right now I'm there. Something came to me this morning as I was riding in with John this can't be the real world. Seems, in one book written by Robert Heinlein in that period, the government had been taken over by a religious zealot, and everything was turned upside down. Finally, this zealot, this religious fanatic, had to be overturned by an armed revolution. Well, we haven't reached that point yet, and I hope we don't. I hope we don't have to, but as I look around, look at the world around me, I wonder, is this real? Can this be real? Or are we living in a badly written science fiction novel that should have been serialized in amazing stories that we shouldn't have to be living through? No? Well, we will live through it. There we are. That's just, as I look around, I see people sitting at a distance from each other and wearing proper masks. This is a sane and sensible thing to be doing, but when we try to get some people in the country to do the same thing, they scream that their rights are being taken away. I don't agree. And it's just unfortunate that more people aren't as sensible as we. But we'll get through it. We'll manage. There we are.
Hi, I'm Kay, and I have a joy. Our garden is getting put to bed and it's looked better than ever. I'm very excited. We have 2 cover crops that are growing beautifully. And on Friday, Alan and John and I got the most beautiful horse manure that I've ever seen. It was so full of worms that it was amazing. So we're putting the garden to bed and I think it's going to be very happy.
I have to say to Joy that we're among a group that appreciates horse poop. I had a thought during the story that Ruby was reading this morning, and the job I was at the end of it. And I worked for an Indian company, and the culture that they had was never admit a mistake. And if they admitted a mistake, they would get yelled at and told by their superiors, no, you argue, you tell them no. And it's like, huh? And I'd had a boss who told me, I don't care if you screw up, just don't make the same mistake a second time. And that's what I would tell my guys. And I remember being in a meeting with my former work people, and they said, and I admitted something, and the guy that was above me, no, we never admit we're wrong. On the I am, and I'm like, it's over. I said, we screwed up, we're sorry, and it's done. And no, we never admit we're wrong. We look like we don't know what we're doing. It's like, well, we didn't. But anyway, and that was one of the reasons I finally just threw it in the towel and left, is I got tired with dealing with things like that. But the reason I came in, I have two joys this morning. They both came after I got here. One, I'm still about 3/4 of an inch taller than Lorelei. We stood back to back and John looked at us, so yay! It's, we have to celebrate our small joys when we're this short. And the second one is John, Mr. Fix-It, is usually totally amazing because I donated the cart and the wheel tended to fall off, which is annoying as heck. He already has it fixed. So that was within like 10 minutes of me telling him. So thank you very much, John.
I have a concern. My uncle in Florida is in hospice. My cousin's the nice thing is that and that seems to be a good way to go.
So, John, I have a blank. I maybe speak for many of us that I was raised in a family where I was given the message that perfectionism, achieving highly was the highest of all things you could do. So I spent my life trying to do that, but unfortunately what that does is it makes you very intolerant of any shortcomings in yourself, and that leads to a lot of self-flagellation. So as I've aged, I've tried to, as the story has said, accept my flaws and not to take that out on myself. The second concern, my wife, many of you may or may not know, tangentially, has a variety of maladies, including arthritis of her back, which is palliated by a shot, some knee pain after a knee replacement, some issues with her brain due to cerebral arteriosclerosis worsened by her chronic smoking. But most importantly, she has an aortic aneurysm, which was found by happenstance about a year ago on an x-ray. Her first ultrasound was 3.8 centimeters. The surgeon said if you stop smoking, it won't get bigger. She said, well, that's my joy, and she's persisted in smoking about 3/4 of a pack. And I would hope not to do anything. She still smoked. We went back last week. It's now 4.9 centimeters. Speaking medically, for a woman, that is time to do something about it. So she's having a CT scan tomorrow, which will accurately tell us the top and bottom ends of it, exact dimensions, and whether she's lucky enough to have a procedure through her groin where they put a sleeve in that basically goes above and below it to buttress it so it won't explode, which will be pretty much instant death if that happens, which is the fear of the expanding aneurysm. Imagine a balloon with thin walls. If not, she'll be having a major operation, one of the biggest left, where you can't do it robotically or laparoscopically, where they would do a large incision, take her bowels out, put them to the side, get to the very back, get to the aneurysm, clamp above and below, hoping you don't lose the brain or the kidneys, whatever, and then put in a graft, a dacron graft, to bridge the gap. So I know we may not believe that there's a holy power that will make her life better. Where she is. So we'll have the scan tomorrow, the surgical visit on Wednesday. By next Sunday, I'll be able to report where we stand.
Thank you, everybody, for sharing your perspectives. Let us hold in our hearts those who have spoken and those who have been mentioned. And be mindful that undoubtedly there are concerns among us that are unspoken. Today's speaker will be talking about history, the past. The past. Now there is an idea we should focus on the present moment. Live in the present. The present, they say, is all there really is. The past is gone, imagined, constraining, its baggage. The philosopher Will Durant has a different view. I quote, "It's a mistake to think the past is dead. The present is merely the past rolled up and concentrated in this second of time. You too are your past. You are what you are because what you have been, because of your heredity stretching back into forgotten generations. So with a city, a country, a race. It is the present, not the past, that dies. This present moment to which we give so much attention is forever fleeting from our eyes. Therefore, I feel we give too much time to news about the transient present, too little to the living past. We know 1,000 items about the day or yesterday, but how, without history, can we understand these events, discriminate their significance, sift out the large from the small, see the basic currents underlying surface movements and changes, and foresee the results sufficiently to guard against fatal error or the souring of reasonable hopes." We now come to the time of the service when we ask you for some additional financial support. The financial support you have already given has not only kept us going in this to support Rick Dusky's work. John, we won't be passing the basket. Remote location. We do offertories to keep these good things going. Due to COVID, we will not be passing the basket.
No.
It is on the table, on the chair next to the doors, where you can contribute anytime during the service or at the end. Well, I see who gives a perspective on history, another perspective on history. Other studies tell us how people might behave for 6,000 years. One who knows that record is in large measure protected in advance against the Okay, well, we'll wait and hope for the best for a few minutes.
It's the time for the song and dance.
Okay.
I'm just gonna dive in and we'll just hope it all works out. Technology. So I'll just start and let me know if there's a problem. I want to start with a personal story. Many years ago, I was called to jury duty on a capital murder case. Now the facts were straightforward, but the verdict not so much. And it turns out that the first vote was 10-2. And you can guess which side I was on, the 2. The 10 wanted first-degree murder, which could have led to a death sentence. And me and one other person felt that that was inappropriate for this particular case. Now, before I go any further, let me tell you a little about my history. I come from a family where dinner time could best be described as discussion time. We would argue about the current topics of the day, we would make our points, and we would often talk on top of each other, and that sort of thing. So when it came to the deliberations, my past had set me up to work the room, if you will. And over time, I was able to convince the rest of the jury that although 10 believed that first-degree murder was the right sentence, all of us agreed that it was at least second degree. And we settled on second degree, and therefore this fellow was not subject to a death sentence. Now, this may make me sound like the good guy here, but I have to tell you the epilogue to this story. And that is that a few years after that, I was listening to NPR, and a woman in Alabama was in nearly the same situation I had been in. But she caved, and the fellow who was on trial was executed. What happened was, she then became an advocate for eliminating the death sentence. And I have to wonder, what would have happened if I hadn't been able to make my case? Would I have taken myself to Dover, Delaware, and stood there and tried to get death sentence in Delaware removed? Well, that's the thing about the past, present, and the future. The past affects your present, but no one can know the futures that might have been. So the genesis of this particular service occurred when I heard the haunting song, "The Past Is Never Past," by the little-known singer Andrea Ravel. And I was attracted by the melody, but especially by the title. "The Past Is Never Past" is a succinct version of the Faulkner quote, "The past is never dead, it's not even past." And as I considered that quote, I realized that it coalesces thoughts I had had, both personal, societal, and religious. From an individual's point of view, both personal experience and societal mores affect perspectives and expectations. So it's indisputable that our past impacts our present and thus our future. But let me be clear at the outset, I am not suggesting that we are determined by our past, only that each of us needs to recognize those influences, those echoes of the past. Our chosen religion, Unitarian Universalism, is also influenced by its past, by our forebears who broke away from their religions. And because Unitarianism is such a personal religion, that will circle us back to the individual. Now, from my point of view, I need to tell you a little more about my past. I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, a true Midwestern upbringing. And I like to think of myself as someone who leaves the past behind. I literally have no friends I communicate with from my childhood. There are only 2 friends from college that I still share the yearly Christmas card with, and none from my graduate work or from my 9 years in Colorado before I came to Delaware. I have just completed a move from Delaware to Tennessee, so we'll see whether that pattern continues. The bottom line is that I always thought of the past as dead, in my rearview mirror, gone. But it really doesn't work that way. Let me give you the most mundane of examples. When I started working with Reverend Greg Chute at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Newark some 25 years ago, before I could let him pay for a meal. Something in my Midwestern upbringing told me, if you have the meal. Now this is particularly perplexing because I grew up in a distinctly non-religious household, and what little religion we practiced was Judaism. I don't remember even meeting a minister until I got to college. Nonetheless, it was embedded deep within my psyche. Ministers don't pay for meals. Respecting ministers isn't a particularly negative ramification of my past, but it was surprising at how deeply ingrained it was. Now, there are other not quite so pleasant reactions that come from a Midwestern upbringing. When I hear a man say, my husband, or a woman say, my wife, a little buzz goes off in my head. It just sounds funny. Understand, I'm fully supportive of gay marriage. Know plenty of married gay couples. There's some tickle from my conservative Midwestern past. And I have to tell you that when I delivered this service at another UU, a woman came up to me after the service. She was about my age and grew up in Chicago. And she said that she too had that odd feeling when she talked about her wife. I was in my late teens before I met an openly gay man. I remember him well. His name was Don Pace, and he was Black. Still, the stories about symphony goer, one story in Blink was one that I was particularly familiar with. Now, in the main world-renowned orchestras, until recently, it was very rare to have women, especially on the brass instruments. Women, it was believed, didn't have the lung capacity and the strength to play French horns and trombones and the like. And sure enough, during auditions, they didn't do well, and very few were in the orchestras. But about 20 years ago, they changed how they auditioned. And they put up a screen so that the people watching the performance could not see who was doing it. But still, very few women were chosen. Now, it turns out that orchestras are still very formal affairs. And women would typically wear high heels to their auditions. And they would go click, click, clack across the stage. So everybody judging them knew that they were women. When women changed to flats, all of a sudden, a large number of women began to be accepted into the orchestra. Now, I can't say whether the judges recognized their bias, but it seems like there's a pretty clear evidence that their beliefs that women couldn't play were affecting their choice. So every minor miss by a miss, if you will, was considered major. And every major success was downplayed. And Blink is filled with examples where people are affected by their unexplored biases. And of course, sadly, some of those are life and death. There's a detailed description in Blink of a shooting of an unarmed black man by white officers, a scenario we are all too familiar with. The assumptions made by the white officers about a black man just out for some air led to disastrous confrontation. And as so often happens in that case, the white officers were acquitted of breaking the law. These patterns, these ingrained beliefs, these stored assumptions, all of us have them in over. That, for instance, we drive on the right-hand side of the road, and that we stop for school buses and for pedestrians. We could not function if we had to think about all of those decisions before acting. But we should be aware it is well known that our society has a variety of biases among people of color and against women. For example, there are fewer female CEOs of Fortune 500 companies than there are CEOs named John. But there are many, many biases that are not so obvious. The average CEO of a Fortune 500 company is about 6 inches taller than the average person. Now, why this is true isn't obvious, but it seems likely that there are some assumptions that tall people make better leaders. Now, it's difficult to deal with these assumptions when they're hidden. And at some level, frankly, the more blatant biases are easier because you can call them out. Admitting you have a problem. In my day, and as I approach retirement and Medicare age, I think I can use the phrase "in my day," people would move to California to start over, as if by leaving their home in, say, St. Louis, or the San Francisco Bay Area, as I did, one could wash away a change that dramatically affects the flow of what had been the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the mistake is to assume that we do not carry the past across the border when one of these events occurs. I read this past month that the head of the Jewish Anti-Defamation League has just apologized for opposing the mosque in the Muslim Community Center near the site of the World Trade Center. Jonathan Greenblatt's thoughtful piece points out that what we needed most at that time was reconciliation and understanding, especially understanding of the non-violent strains of Islam. And his organization's choices at that time exacerbated the strain of 9/11. Of course, this apology comes 20 years after the event, but it's something. And the reaction of many right-wing followers concerning the COVID-19 vaccine and mask follows a pattern established long before COVID-19 appeared: anti-science, anti-government. It's ironic that one of the greatest scientific accomplishments of modern history, the creation of vaccines within a single year, was a government, many of whose constituents refused to take advantage of it. These societal biases impact our philosophy and our religious perspectives as well. Western society is founded on principles laid out by the ancient Greeks, by Aristotle, Plato, and their kin. And the Greeks, for the most part, had a strict deconstructive philosophy. Everything was broken down into smaller and smaller pieces. We get the word atom from that which is indivisible, the smallest piece. Now, the Dalai Lama puts it this way, quote, "Underlying the view of scientific materialism is the assumption that, in the final analysis, matter, as it can be described by physics and as it is governed by the laws of physics, is all there is. Accordingly, this view would uphold that psychology can be reduced to biology, biology to chemistry, and chemistry to physics," unquote. This approach is the antithesis of a holistic approach, a systems approach. It is often true that you simply cannot look at the pieces and understand the whole. Only in recent times have we learned about complexity, theory, and emergent behavior much greater than the sum of its termites can be which in scale dwarf anything humans have accomplished, more than 1,000 the height of a single termite. Of course, the most amazing example is the human brain. A single neuron is only minimally complex, but interconnect a billion neurons and you get, well, us. So in an attempt to explain the world, the Greeks broke things down and assumed they could understand individually. It is through this Western approach to philosophy that we mind split. But we have only begun to understand that this distinction is false. Consider the placebo effect. There have been many studies where a drug with no active ingredient is given, and yet it cures a significant percentage of patients, sometimes nearly as many as the drug being tested. When we take a pill or visit, we go to patient will get better. Our experience tells us so. And our mental belief we will get better can in some cases impact our physical body and actually help cure us. With the right support, our mind can in fact influence our well-being. The point is that there is a combination of factors that affect how we do things. The rituals of healing, the history that we have in terms of how to hit a baseball or how to behave in society. And from a societal perspective, this set of expectations defines the status quo, the societal standards that people are expected to uphold. But Unitarian Universalism is a religion of heresy, of disrupting the status quo. Now, the Unitarian part comes from the comes from the heresy of denying hell. God is too loving to consign any of his children to hell. Everyone should be saved. Now, these arguments are in the past. I've been a Unitarian Universalist for more than 30 years. Obsolete. But that is taking too parochial a view. The point of Unitarian Universalism is not those two very specific arguments, but instead a perspective on religious freedom itself. UUs are fundamentally liberal, believing that each person has the right to interpret religion as their heart leads them, without being tied to the strictures of the status quo. Some might think that means the past is irrelevant to UUs, but nothing can be further from the truth. The only way we can avow for the past is to understand it. In the front of our hymnal, it says, "Grateful for the religious pluralism which enriches and ennobles our faith, we are inspired to deepen our understanding and expand our vision." That deepening, that expansion comes only with a careful reading of those traditions upon which our free religion is based. It's impossible to start from scratch, to clear the board and start over. We are influenced by the ways of thoughts that came before us. And it isn't just writing, it's embedded in our culture, the messages we have received as we mature. Each of us brings our own history to our search for truth and meaning. Each of us desires to grow those cultural bonds, but before we can even try, we need to understand them. As George Santayana said, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. The key in my mind is awareness. We need to be aware of how our personal experience influences our current actions, how societal messages construct our prejudices and biases. And for those who are following the UU consideration of an eighth principle, that is essentially the point. That society has inherent biases and racism which serve whites and denigrate people of color. And that we as a people be felt throughout our lives. But we also carry reminders of the loving kindness we have experienced. We are, each of us, the sum of our experiences, but so very much more. The past is never past. It is part of us, for good, for bad. We cannot divorce ourselves from the past. What we can do is recognize its influences on how we behave, what we believe, and how we interact with each other. As you go through your week, perhaps you can take a moment when you are reacting to something, a moment to ask yourself, where is this coming from? And make sure it is not driven by where you have been, what you
Thank you, Gary, for a very thoughtful presentation. We are running out of time, so we will skip the last hymn and go to the extinguishing the chalice. We end our service today by extinguishing the chalice. May the memory of its light and the light of this service stay with us. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, Gary, again, for a very nice presentation.
It's really great, Barry. I loved it.
Well,
Thanks.
No, I sent a message to Deep Rick, and I'm gonna let you forget to give me your new address in Tennessee, so I can keep doing my holiday parties.
I'm afraid to talk, I'm talking.
They're just milling around and talking. It's disturbing. We can talk. No, we're just talking over here. They're talking over there. It makes no difference. They're not listening to us. If they are, then it's like we're saying something else.
Yeah, I'm gonna send it now, so I don't forget.
Oh, okay, great. I appreciate that. So.
Technology is always the fun part, eh?
Yeah, well, I was watching